Hello, and welcome to this episode of Marine Band Offstage. I'm your host, Gunnery Sergeant Connor Mikula. Musicians demand a lot from their bodies to perform, especially at a high level. They need the breath control to hold a long, steady note, the finger dexterity to rip through a technical passage, and even the soft tissue control of the face to help shape the tone. It's all such a delicate process that even the smallest bump can throw the whole thing off balance. A bump, such as a musical injury. In this episode, I sit down with some members of the Marine Band to talk about dealing with injuries, preventative care, and the effects it can have on us as musicians. Hello, and thank you for joining us. Today, we have two band members here to talk about musical injuries. First off, we are welcoming back clarinetist Gunnery Sergeant Lucy DeSano. How are you, Lucy?
I'm well, thank you.
And then we have auxiliary clarinetist extraordinaire Gunnery Sergeant Shannon Kiewit. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you.
Now, Shannon, you are a wonderful clarinetist, but you're actually here in a different capacity. Would you tell us about your qualifications in regards to fitness, health, and wellness?
Sure. I am a master trainer from International Sports and Sciences Association, and that means that I hold numerous certifications to include personal training, professional nutrition coaching, corrective exercise, and sports therapy, sports conditioning, just to name a few of those things.
Okay, so you're well versed in all of this, and you go around and give presentations about this stuff, right?
I do. I am very interested. I've been interested in it a long time, and my interest has turned towards musicians and how I can help musicians overcome injuries and have longevity in their careers.
Great. So for some of us listening right now that maybe aren't too familiar with musical injuries, they might be thinking, how do you even get injured playing an instrument? So how is that something that can come about?
Injuries can come about due to just how we're holding our instrument. If you think about holding something heavy in front of you, it can cause you to have poor posture, muscle imbalances, and simply doing functional things throughout the day. You can get injured if your movement patterns are off.
What kind of injuries do those look like? Like something feels off, but what is it that's off? Like how specifically could we get injured from something like playing an instrument for several hours a day?
Sure, like repetitive motions with
exactly.
our hands and fingers and up into our forearms and into our shoulders. Sure, those repetitive motions, when we're, as musicians, if we're sitting and doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over, and say we haven't done anything prior to that to warm ourselves up, we're putting ourselves in a position to get that injury. And even, like I said about posture, and just sitting in one spot for a long time, you're creating weaknesses throughout the body that are going to cause injuries from playing your instrument as well.
And I think maybe a musical injury might look like tendinitis is something that we may have as a musical injury. Or are there any other common musical injuries?
All the way up into the back, shoulders. As musicians in general, we have weak backs simply because of that instrument in front of us. The front of our body is much stronger, and so it's tight. So we get tightness in the front, weakness in the back. So you can have pain up through your neck, shoulders, which can resonate all the way down into your hands, and even weaknesses just from sitting all day. Core is weak. All this resonates throughout the body, and you just don't realize how many injuries you can have from simply what we do as musicians.
Right. And you said sitting all day. I always feel weird when I need to stand up after sitting and watching TV for a little while and being like, oh, I need to stretch, even though I've been sitting here doing nothing. So you've been using words like warm up, stretch, practice. And to me, when I hear those, I think of athletes. I think of someone warming up for a track practice or, my favorite NFL player, Jared Goff. So would you talk about a little bit about how maybe performing an instrument is sort of similar to training as an athlete? Like, I don't think that we are, NFL professional athletes, but there's surely some overlap there, no?
Yeah. Do you consider musicians athletes? This is a question that I get often. And if you think about it, musicians and athletes have one thing in common. And what do you think that thing is?
We use our bodies.
Yes, our body. Our body is a tool that we use. And athletes, their making sure to take care of their body. They're making it a priority. They're warming it up prior to performance or practice. And if you think of musicians, we make sure our instrument's warmed up. We make sure our instrument is overhauled and pads are taken care of and springs and all this stuff. But what about our bodies? We come into rehearsal, we warm up our instrument. What are we doing for ourselves? And athletes do that to ensure that they are playing at top level. Musicians tend to, in my experience, put that to the side. So what we should be thinking about doing is taking a few moments to do especially some kind of dynamic stretching. Dynamic meaning you're getting blood flow to the muscles. We always say stretch, but we want to make sure that stretch is dynamic. So something that replicates the movement pattern that we're going to be doing during our practice and performance. So this could look like wrist stretches, flexion, extension stretches, stretches up into your shoulders. So like simple shoulder rolls, those types of things. Seated twists to get your back warmed up. Extensions, stretching your back, thoracic extensions. So there's all different exercises you can do. But coming back to athletes and musicians, we really do need to prepare our bodies to prevent any injuries from playing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's important to keep in mind, preparing to or being a professional musician. And Lucy, have you ever felt like an athlete in your job?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's funny because I'm listening to Shannon talk and thinking, oh yeah, those are definitely things I should be doing. But absolutely, I think especially when you're playing music at a really high level, it puts really intense demands on oftentimes very small muscle groups. And I think it really is, I think, to your point, just a matter of mindset that we don't think of ourselves as athletes versus like I think of Tom Brady and his, like all his crazy stretching routine that he has. Like we don't think of ourselves in that same way, but of course we are made of human bodies the same way that an athlete is. So we should absolutely be doing the same things.
Right, but not all musical injuries actually come from performing. It doesn't take much to interfere with everything that goes into performing a musical instrument. You can get an injury doing something as mundane as waste removal. Lucy,
I see what you did there.
Would you mind sharing about your injury that you're currently dealing with?
Yes. So I really, really wish I had a better story for you. But I injured my left wrist doing something very mundane. I was taking a heavy bag of trash out to my trash can, and I'm a very short person, and it was a very tall trash can, so I had to lift the bag up above my head, and my wrist did not like that. So I have two small tears, one in the tendon and one in a muscle complex in my wrist, that I've been dealing with for about 5 months at this point. So it was not a performance injury per se, but being in my wrist, and it involves muscles and tendons that attached to my fingers as well. So it definitely affects day to day how I'm playing my instrument.
And an injury like that can be, annoying enough in day-to-day life, but your job is playing the clarinet. You're a professional clarinetist. So how does that interfere with your clarinet playing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in general, so it is getting better after a few months. But for me specifically, my fourth and fifth, my ring finger and my pinky finger on that hand are slower than they need to be. And it also, if I practice a lot, I get pain. And what I am noticing as I've gone, it's been several months that I've had this injury, and at the beginning, my doctors kind of told me just don't play the clarinet for a few weeks.
Yeah, and that's not always an option when it's your...
Right. Yeah, well, and I did at the very beginning. For a couple of weeks. And this was also kind of before we knew what was really going on with it. Now I've had an MRI, and so we have a much clearer picture. But since that point, the advice has changed to be I can do all of the normal activities as long as it doesn't cause me pain. And I'm trying to find, or have found, that I just need to modify the ways that I'm practicing and my kind of approach to performance so that I'm not hurting myself while I'm doing it.
So, Shannon, what does treatment for a musical injury even look like besides just don't play the clarinet anymore? What are some treatment options, or what are some things that will commonly be prescribed to people who have gone through this?
Sure, as a corrective exercise specialist, I'm not treating or diagnosing, but I am evaluating and assessing things like movement patterns and posture and muscle imbalances. I would say, if you have an injury, obviously you want to go and make sure, you're getting some professional assistance with that. But prior to getting injury, there are things we can do so that we can ward off injury. And that's kind of where I come in. So like going back to the warm-ups, so that you don't get injured, let's go and talk about some like the dynamic stretches. So Lucy's injured her hand and wrist area, right? So once she's healed, or maybe going through physical therapy, you might be given some of these exercises I'm going to talk about. Like for wrists, just doing simple flexion and extensions and using a small resistance band where you're taking your hand back and forward, right? And you can do those dynamic, meaning you're going to move through that. And you do that prior to your practice. At the end of your practice, you might want to do something more static since your muscles are already warm, and then you're holding it. And that's going to help you to recover quicker because you're helping get more pliability and flexibility in there, And these are just kind of physical therapy exercises that you would incorporate into your practice session. Like add these into something you're already doing. Like I said, musicians, we tend to put off doing fitness and stuff like that. We're busy individuals, right? But just adding these small exercises onto what you're already doing, which is practicing, you're setting yourself up for success. So, and also going into other exercises that we should be thinking about to ward off injury is ensuring we don't have imbalances. So getting into things like strength training, making sure that we have strong core. Our core is the center of everything we do. And whether we know it or not, like our core sends energy out through our body, and just for example, if you're sitting here and you punch out without thinking about your core, you're just like this. So I'm punching right now. I'm sitting down, I'm punching forward as if I'm punching a bag. But then I really engage my core and then I punch much stronger. And in general, musicians, we have weak cores, sitting, things like that. So just taking account of where the root cause is for certain injuries you have, looking at, am I warming up? Am I cooling down? How do I hold my instrument? What's my posture look like when I'm seated after I've been practicing for an hour? What's my posture look like when I stand up? Am I leaning to one side or the other? Am I taking breaks during my practice? Athletes take breaks. They rest. They rest between sets or hydrate, whatever it is. And so then we need to also be doing those things. And all that I mentioned is going to help to mitigate any further injury and help create that longevity.
It's great that you mentioned posture, because I remember earlier in my musical career, I went through a thing that I had to go to a physical therapist for. I had pain in my shoulder. And it turns out the cause of that was I was holding my saxophone and lifting my left elbow up a little bit. In the biz, we call that chicken winging the saxophone. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, we call that chicken wing too.
And just from lifting that a little bit, I had these horrible shoulder pains. And when I went in and a doctor told me I needed physical therapy, I was doing all these tiny little exercises and strengthening my lower back. And I thought, what does that have to do with my shoulder? And no, like you're right, imbalances and things like that, it helped me. So for someone who's looking to find some of these exercises that might be able to help prevent injury or to get themselves moving, Shannon, are there any resources that you would point them towards to kind of get them started or show them specific exercises?
Sure. There's plenty of resources out there. There's plenty of videos online. I just will say that be careful with what you are looking at online, because there's a lot of good information and there's a lot of misinformation. So if you are looking up specific exercises, say you want to look for an exercise to help with your rotator cuff, looking at some good physical therapy videos, someone who has a background, someone who has the ability to diagnose and treat. There's a lot of those videos out there. You can find a lot of sites from medical establishments that show those kinds of videos that can at least get you started with some exercises you can incorporate into your practice. A lot of different, stretching you can do, mobility, exercises for extended sitting, posture work, core, you name it. But just be very careful with what you are taking in, because there's just a lot of information out there.
I know a lot of musicians all have their own specific techniques that they like. Like I've heard of the Alexander technique, but is there anything that you specifically recommend people do or look at?
I think of interest is body mapping. And if you haven't heard of body mapping, it's just it's a way to understand how our body works, from how our lungs work to how our arm is connected to our shoulder. And I think when we're practicing, we don't think about that. And when we have a better understand of mapping our body, it can actually help us to mitigate injury, just because we have that understanding of what's happening with our body, with our specific instrument, when we're practicing, when we're performing. So you can just Google body mapping and dive into that, because it's a very interesting topic.
Lucy, is there anything that maybe any exercises you've been given that for your specific injury have helped you in your experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like anytime I am given physical therapy, it feels like the exercises that they give you are so small, or like, you think of like exercise, you're like breaking a sweat, you're doing something really intense, and they give you these like, do 10 reps of this thing, and you're not even gonna need to catch your breath afterwards. It feels like you're doing nothing, but it makes such a huge difference to your quality of life after. For my injury, I think the most useful thing that I have found, not necessarily even like physical therapy type exercises, but has been kind of altering my approach to practicing while I'm injured. Because for me specifically, and with my particular injury, it's about avoiding sort of angering that area, just literally just giving it time to heal, because there's nothing else to be done for it. So I have really tried to find ways to practice around it, I guess, rather than exercising it, if that makes sense.
And I would just make a note to everyone listening. That's something that's been great for you and your injury. Everyone's injury is different. And I would urge people to seek professional advice and follow that advice. But thank you for sharing what works for you and what works for me. I remember they gave me an exercise where I had a 1 pound weight that I had to move a certain way. And I thought, 1 pound? Who even has a 1 pound weight? I couldn't even finish the set they gave me. They said, do this 10 reps 3 times. And in the middle of the second one, I had to tap out. I was,
Yeah.
But injuries, especially when you do this for a living, can happen to anyone, from overuse to rogue garbage bag attacks. I'd say most musicians that I personally know deal with something like this at least once in their career. So we've already talked about stretching, dynamic stretching, Shannon, but what are some things for people to do, professional or not, general things that we can do to prepare for, maybe even prevent injuries?
Preventing injuries, I think we don't move enough in general. Folks don't move enough. I think making sure that we have good range of motion, if you think about that, that we're mobile. Being mobile is kind of the foundation of everything we do. So things like yoga, incorporating yoga, that's going to help ward off injury for sure. Mobility, so we're talking about like joints, your range of motion. That's super important to have, especially as we age. So ensuring that you're incorporating something like that. And I think when we think of fitness and taking care of our bodies. We're thinking, oh, I've got to set aside this much time during the day to do it. I don't have that time. I don't have that much time to do it. So we put it off and we're not consistent with it. It really just comes down to starting small and doing something, whether it's 5 or 10 minutes, doing something consistently, getting outside and getting in a walk. Not only is this going to help us to ward off injuries, get stronger, it's also going to help us be more focused and help with our mental health too, which is huge when it comes to how we feel about our bodies and how we're taking care of ourselves.
So if let's say someone's listening to this on their couch right now and you had to give them one thing to get them moving right now at this moment, pressure's on, listener, what would you tell them to do?
Tell them one thing to do? Okay, let's start basic. I would say get out and walk. Walking, you're getting in cardiovascular, you're using your lungs, freeing your mind, you're working on posture, you're strengthening glutes, strengthening core, and it's enjoyable. I mean, I feel walking is enjoyable. I'd rather walk than run. So, I would say get out and walk. I had someone ask me this once before, what is something I can do? Tell me what to do. And I said, get out and walk. And they came back to me a couple months later, and it was incredible, the change. I said, all I've been doing is walking. And this is also another clarinet player I know. And they were just amazed at how much better they were playing, like lung capacity, support, and just feeling better and stronger and not having pain, like no more back pain, no more knee pain. So literally, if I'm going to tell somebody to do something, I'm going to say you need to make sure you're aware of how much you're moving.
Mm-hmm. I definitely know when I take breaks in my practicing that I always feel a little more focused when I get up and walk around, get a drink of water, and I always notice that I'm a little less focused if I spend my break just kind of doom scrolling on my phone. So yes, getting up and moving, I think.
You bring up a really interesting point, actually. One of the things that I've discovered through this sort of process of working around my injury is, I think, musicians were very busy people, we're very focused people. And I think in my practicing, I tend to be like too goal-oriented, if that makes sense, where it's like, I have to learn the notes, I have to practice it now, I have to get it right. And I actually think that if I take a little bit more time and I'm a little bit more mindful, I tax my body less. So I'm noticing that I'm finding that I have played with quite a bit of tension in this sort of, rush to learn all the notes and get all the things done. And, I have a toddler at home, so everything feels like a time crunch all the time. But if I play the same passage 2 ways, like playing it slower than I might otherwise, feels fine. And then when I try to play it fast before I have perhaps learned the notes as well as I should have, that's when I have pain. So it's been, for me, a really good reminder to, be really mindful with my practicing and to slow down with my practicing, which is something I knew, I think, when I was younger, but then just like life happens and you get into a certain pattern. But for me, I find that I learn the notes just as well if I take the time to play them slowly versus if I try to play them quickly right away. And it has the added benefit of I'm not building tension into my playing.
I think being free of tension and learning things slowly are all things that in our heart of hearts we know is the right way to do it. Yep. But in practice, I definitely will be learning a technical passage and then at the end of it go, whew, okay, break. And then I'll just feel my body melt like, whoa, I've been tensing from head to toe this whole time.
Right.
So actually practicing it is another thing that I think is very useful. So physical symptoms tend to be more obvious and objective, but when you dedicate so much of your life to mastering an instrument, there's a definite mental aspect to being injured. And Shannon, you touched on this earlier, but how does mental health factor into a musical injury?
Well, it takes you away from that thing you really love doing, playing. You're not able to do it as well. You can't meet your expectations. You feel like you're letting a group down maybe. And then also just wondering, like, how long am I going to be injured? Is this going to come back? Fear too. But I think injury too, if we look at it in the right way, builds resiliency. If you look at it in positively and what you can get from it and what you can learn from it, definitely builds resiliency and character also, which goes into the mental aspect also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally relate to this idea of worrying when is this going to be better? It kind of erodes this like sense of control that you have over your life. And in my particular case, like I was told that it would probably take about 6 months for my injury to get better, which is a long time to not feel your best, especially when I think for musicians, so much of our identity is wrapped up in our music making. And so for me, I have tried to sort of look at this as an opportunity, rather than driving myself crazy with the things that I can't do or the things that I can't do well. I'm trying to focus instead on, okay, what am I learning from this? What am I getting from this that I wouldn't otherwise have? So, I mentioned the tension piece before, that I'm having this realization of, slowing my practice down will be better for my longevity anyway. And I'm also trying to get like kind of nerdy about parts of my playing that I otherwise wouldn't have. I'm rechecking like, how is my embouchure? I'm pulling out all of my old like my Jean-Jean and my Perrier, and I'm doing a lot of right hand only finger exercises, and also just getting into like a score and analyzing the music or trying to think about what about this piece am I really into, and exploring it in that way, because I think there are so many aspects of being a musician beyond simply moving your fingers or blowing into your instrument that we can explore and that are really, really cool. So I've tried to spend as much time as I can trying to get into those things while I am not necessarily where I want to be physically with my clarinet playing.
I like what you said about the other aspects of being a musician, because when I, with my shoulder things previously, was told to take a break and stop practicing, I kind of experienced that loss of identity you were talking about. I'm a saxophonist and I want to be the best saxophonist that I can. And so when I have to stop that for a little bit, I think, well, okay, what's left? So, and I think we as musicians tend to make a lot of who we are about performing our instrument, but getting into other parts of it, I think is very, very healthy. And, I don't think I did more score studying on things I was performing than when I couldn't practice for very long every day. And that factored into my performance, and I think in the long run made it even better.
Yeah, I think it can be really hard to see past the experience that you're having in the moment. But I personally know several musicians who had, in some cases, devastating injuries where they couldn't play. I'm thinking of one person in particular who could only mental practice for half a year and came back even better for it. Another person who had to completely reteach themselves, had like a very catastrophic injury, had to completely reteach themselves how to play their instrument, and gained a ton of insight in that process. So I think from a mental health standpoint, just realizing that if you do have an injury, this is not forever. This is not, you know what I mean? This is not the end of your life. And you don't know what positive things might come from this experience that you're having if you look for them.
I know, having dealt with some of this myself, that it can be difficult to go find treatment for a musical injury. There's a stigma that you should push through the pain, or that you're being weak or overreacting for seeking help for hurting while playing a clarinet, right? So what advice would you give to a musician listening that might feel that way?
Sure. If you're having issues with pain, managing, performing, I definitely go seek out professional help. Definitely. You don't want to keep exacerbating that pain and, like you said, pushing through it and making it worse, and then really taking yourself out of commission for the long haul. there's always things you can do to, as I was talking about prior, there's always things that you can do to encourage yourself to not get injured. The different types of exercises, corrective exercises you can do, and just being aware of your body and how you're holding yourself. But if you're feeling pain, it's absolutely necessary to go get that checked out sooner than later, and not have that fear that, oh, if I'm going to be seen as I'm gonna lose out on this job or that audition. I've got an audition coming up, and I've got to take the audition. I don't have time to get help and take care of this. There's always going to be another audition. There's always going to be another job. There's going to be plenty of opportunities, and I think it's that fear that keeps us from. We think music is a very competitive career, right? And we don't want to miss out. So, but definitely pushing through it is putting yourself at risk for not playing at all in the future. So be honest with yourself and definitely go seek help, like Lucy here.
Yeah. I'm going to try to think if I had just ignored this, probably would not feel great. But for me, I think like pain is information, right? Pain is your body trying to tell you something.
Absolutely.
And perhaps not every pain that you feel in your body requires professional intervention, but unless you know that, for whatever reason, like it's always better to have an expert help you than to avoid that, I think.
I know I definitely felt some version of weak when my shoulder was keeping me from playing saxophone, but I think with hindsight, I've learned that the strong thing to do is to seek help when you need it. Shannon, Lucy, we appreciate you talking with us about this important topic, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Thank you.
This episode was written by Gunnery Sergeant Connor Mikula, produced by Gunnery Sergeant Joe Cradler, and edited by Staff Sergeant Stephen Rudman. Recorded in John Philip Sousa Band Hall at Marine Barracks, Washington, D.C.